What's up everyone? This video will be an overview of Stardeus game design. So we will go through everything, what I have made so far and what I'm planning to make, and we'll see how the game clicks together and what are the pieces and how they interact with each other. As you can see, it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of things to it, and this chart or whatever that is actually way simplified. There's so many more systems and so many more concepts in the game, but these are likely the most important ones. Yeah, so let's go and start with the genre. So Stardeus essentially is a colony simulator with base building elements, because you're building your ship. It's your base, which moves around in space and you can fly with it. And you have a colony with your robots and your colonists, humans, animals, and whatnot living on your ship. There's also resource management involved, because you are having to build sustainable ecosystem for your colony on your ship. So you have to think about food, you have to produce water, you have to have materials required for building everything, to run the devices, to generate electricity and all that. Also, it's 4X-ish, which means that in the end vision of the game, I want this to be like a bit of a grand strategy where you can conquer some regions of the universe. There will be ship-to-ship combats, and there will be like deeper diplomacy options with other factions. And finally, this is a god game. But this comes with a bit of a caveat, because in typical god games, nobody asks why. For example, you can give orders to people, so you just basically influence their minds directly. And in this game, you are playing in the role of the ship computer, which means that not everyone will be actually listening to your orders, and you will have some limitations. So it's maybe let's call it a limited god game. You're in control of what you can control, but some things may not be controllable for you. And soon I will explain why and how this is affected in the game. So before we go on, let's also look at the influences. Well, of course, this game is influenced heavily by RimWorld, also by Factorio in probably almost equal amounts, because in RimWorld you do have ways to produce things, but not nearly as much as in Factorio. In Factorio, the whole game is about production. And in Stardeus, it's a little bit of a mix, because there's a lot of production chains, a lot of resource management, and way more than in RimWorld. Yeah, so then of course Prison Architect was a huge influence. The thing in Prison Architect which I enjoyed a lot was that you had like two factions in the same map. There was your guards and there was your prisoners. So you would be managing those prisoners indirectly through the guards and building the housing facilities and all that. In Stardeus, you do have robots and you have colonists. So colonists are not actually prisoners, and some of them will be actually your allies. There's this stat called AI alignment, and if your colonists have high AI alignment, they will be listening to your orders. But if they don't have that alignment with you, they will have free will and they will execute it. So they will just be doing whatever they like, and just like the prisoners in Prison Architect. So this dual faction mechanic is actually inspired by Prison Architect. Then, of course, there's FTL, the classic space roguelike crawler, where you go through the procedurally generated space and fight ships. I think the ship-to-ship combat, which is not yet in the game, is going to be heavily influenced by FTL. The space travel in the latest update is also influenced by FTL. Yeah, so FTL is a big influence on this one. There's also Oxygen Not Included. From Oxygen Not Included, the main influence was the way how oxygen and heat is transferred on the ship. So in Stardeus, oxygen and heat is tile-based, which means that you're not oxygenating and pressurizing a room, but you're doing it tile by tile. So if you put a oxygen production device, it will be spawning oxygen around itself, and the systems will be simulating the spread of the oxygen and like mixing it with the environment, and it's all system based. And this influence is coming from Oxygen Not Included, which did that first with their fluid mechanics, which was amazing. And of course, there's Dwarf Fortress. While I myself am too dumb to play it, I saw how other people do it, and I was mesmerized by the depth of it. So a lot of things where things get deep in Stardeus mechanics, it's influenced by Dwarf Fortress, because they actually made the first super ultra deep game. And I think it's a lot of fun both making such a game and playing such a game. The biggest challenge is actually to make it approachable to the player, because in my opinion, Dwarf Fortress, well, they made a huge leap when they released the Steam version, but prior to that, it was really hard to get into Dwarf Fortress and to learn how to play it, and I never found the time. So yeah, I might play it someday. I bought it on Steam on release day to support the developers, but I have only like 1 hour on Steam in Dwarf Fortress myself. So I cannot say I'm a good player, but I'm very well aware of this game and how much did it do to spawn games like RimWorld that were influenced by Dwarf Fortress. Okay, then there's other influences like the Bobbyverse book series by Dennis E. Taylor. The first one is called We Are Legion. So in these book series, like in Stardeus, you are stuck inside a computer. So you are basically an AI or a neural network. Your brain was scanned and loaded into a machine, and you have to travel the universe and explore it as a self-replicating drone. So this part clearly is influenced by these book series where you are the ship AI and the ship computer in this game in Stardeus. And this is where the limitation of the God game come from, because as a ship computer, you only have some fraction of the things that a God could do. You're not almighty. Great series, highly recommended. And then there's this Passengers movie. In that Passengers movie, which is kind of a little bit cheesy, romantic comedy, I would say, sci-fi romantic movie or whatever. There's a Ark vessel flying through space with everybody sleeping in stasis, and there's like a malfunctioning pod where a dude wakes up, and then he breaks another pod to wake up a girl, and then they just like live in an empty spaceship. So this was where the influence for stasis arrays came from. So in Stardeus, stasis arrays are the devices that hold tons of colonists that can wake up. So it's like a spawning machine where you get new people for your colony, because you start out with just a few people, but your colony grows over time because they wake up from stasis. So that's where this influence is coming from. Now, the game design pillars. First of all, since this is a Paradox game, more or less, because the publisher, Paradox Arc, has their own pillars, there's a lot of overlap. So let's first take a look at Paradox pillars. So Paradox has agency, which gives players freedom to do whatever they like. They have living worlds. They have inviting games, which are approachable to keep players engaged, and they have good onboarding, which I think I'm a little bit failing in my regard. So this is probably the weakest thing in Stardeus, because onboarding is a little bit difficult. I have to do a better job with that, and I'll do my best to change this to the better. And then what else do you have? The games are cerebral. They prefer challenge the player's mind, not their reflexes. So this is why in Stardeus you have like the time that you can stop, and you don't have to rush. You can think what you're doing, and so on. And of course, endless experiences, which means that you just keep playing or replaying and get the different experience every time, and you can enjoy it for hundreds and even thousands of hours without getting bored. Yeah, but this is the Paradox games. But in Stardeus, I have my own pillars, so there's a bit of an overlap. Player agency is the overlapping one, where I want everyone to be able to play Stardeus the way they like it. So there's no one way to play, one like correct way to play. There's multiple scenarios. Each scenario gives a different way of playing the game, a little bit different start which affects the gameplay a lot. Then there's the replayability. So it means that when you play the game several times, each run will be different. There's a lot of procedural generation involved. Every time you start on a ship, the ship is procedurally generated and then procedurally destroyed if it's a wrecked scenario. The universe is generated also using procedural rules. It will always be different. And you can also choose this starting location, which will increase the replayability even further. There's a lot of things you can customize. There's modifiers and yeah, it's just a lot of stuff to customize. So I hope I delivered on the replayability with this one. Then there's the systems-driven design, which means that the game is not really linear. It's not scripted. The way everything works is that there's a world and there's systems in the world. And these systems are actually producing the whole gameplay. So everything is system-based, which means, like, for example, if something caught on fire, it's not scripted. It was due to some system triggering something, and the fire spreads due to systems. It looks at the oxygen levels. It looks at the flammability numbers of the surrounding environments and at the transmission rate values and all that. And basically, it's all simulated. It's like a very deep simulation and not a scripted linear game with plot where everything is on rails and you just play through. Yeah, so emergent gameplay is actually basically the same as the number 3, because most of the stuff that makes the gameplay fun is actually emerging from those systems and interactions of those systems with each other. Okay, then moddable design. From day one, when I started working on Stardeus, I made whatever I could to make it very extendable and very moddable. So you can add new content. Lots of times you can do this even without writing a single line of code, just by adding a JSON file and art images into the right folders, creating a mod, and your content is available. So the modding community is not great and huge at this point, but this is just because the game is not really popular enough for having a huge modding community. And there's still, of course, a lot of work to be done with making it even more easily accessible to modders, exposing more things, more internals, making more tutorials, making more videos about how to mod the game and making it easier to do. But all the tools are there. It has built-in harmony support. It has lots of hooks for mods. You can write C# code to create mods easily and so on. Yeah, and then finally, it's community driven. So for the vast majority of the project, I was streaming the development live on Twitch, so you could jump in and talk to me and ask questions and discuss and give suggestions. Of course, you can do that from many other sources, like on Discord and Steam forums. There's an in-game feedback form, and I try to handle and react to almost all the feedback and all the suggestions that I get. And I'm listening to the community a lot when I'm making this game, and lots of the ideas, lots of the changes and things that are in the game are made thanks to the community. The community is also doing a lot of translation work, and I'm very grateful for that. And there's lots of people who help me out in testing new updates by trying them early. And I'm really, really grateful for the wonderful community that is growing around Stardeus. Yeah, so now when we covered this, let's go over to the chart here. So the way I will go through this chart, I'm going to start here with the ship computer, which is U. And as I go, I'm going to be marking these items as green to mark that they are covered. And we're going to go through the whole chart. We're going to jump around a little bit because it's not very coherent here. And it's not really, the connections are not perfect in this case, because sometimes something will be missing. So to begin with, you're the ship computer, which brings the limitations to the controls of the game. So for example, For example, there is this electricity grid. So let's start by explaining why it's one of the most important things in the game. So as a ship computer, you have to have a data link to a device or to whatever, to some object, to some door, to I don't know, oxygen pump or whatever, to control that thing. So you, for example, cannot select a disconnected door and lock it, right? You have to connect it to electricity. Then it gives you a data link through your network, and then you can change the lock state from locked to unlocked, and from unlocked to locked. You can change the door permissions and so on. So this is one limitation of the God game. So you actually have to have that connection. And this sometimes trips new players because they're trying to just say connect two devices together when they're not connected to the main ship computer. So there's a lot of pop-ups and in-game things in the tutorial covering this. So you'd have to understand that every time that if there's your ship computer here and there's device here and another device here, you cannot connect these devices together like this. You have to first connect this device to the ship computer. This has to be a connector. And then you can connect whatever this connector can reach. But you cannot connect things like that. And you cannot connect like this. Yeah, so this is something that people sometimes miss or overlook. But it's a very important concept because electricity grid is your data line. It's like your hands. Whatever you are connected to, you can control. And the secondary, well, probably the primary function of electricity grid is to actually route the electricity. So you have things like, let's say, a reactor, which is producing energy, and there's like another device which is consuming energy. So if you have a connection between these two devices, the electricity will flow from this reactor to the device. And it's, of course, daisy chains as well. So it will flow to all the connected devices along the way. And then if you have energy deficit, if there's more devices that you can provide, there will be a deficit, and you'll have to build more connectors, more matter reactors, more solar panels to feed the grid a little bit more. So we covered the electricity grid. It's a very important concept, but that's why we covered it one of the first. Next thing I want to look at is the ship. So what exactly is the ship? You're the ship computer, right? So you reside on the ship. What exactly is a ship? So in terms of Stardeus, a ship is a section of floors which are interconnected with each other, and there is a ship computer in that section. So that makes a ship. Now you can have other sections around. These will be called ship sections. So these will be just like disconnected floor pieces. One thing you can do with them is to build a little bridge between the sections to then merge them, and this is now your ship, this whole structure. And there's another mechanic where you can winch. There's a tutorial about that. So you build a winch hook and winch anchor, and then you winch this ship part and it gets connected. So then in the end, you have this weird shape, or maybe a pretty ship if you're good at designing things. And of course, to make it a true ship, it also needs more devices like the engines. It needs bridge controls and connections to the ship computer through the connectors in order to actually make it an operatable ship, which can fly. So there's multiple types of engines. And then finally, there has to be some crew that would be going to, say, operate the ship, operate the bridge controls and fly it. So ship basically is floors plus ship computer connected into one chunk. Now, yeah, the ship is covered. Let's go to devices. So the devices are on the ship. They are part of the ship. You build them on the floor. There's lots of variety here. There's devices for life support, things like beds, things like cooking stations. There's production, which can be something like a furnace that smelts various ores into plates, and it could be crafting stations or assembly hubs which produce various devices. Some of the devices require having an operator, which means that someone has to stand near the device and do the work. Other devices are fully automated, which means that they just operate on their own. And yeah, there's a bunch of the devices. Some of them are essential to create the environment. So environment is its own thing, which means that there's like oxygen and heat simulation, and the devices can produce oxygen and can warm things up to create this livable environment for your colony. All right, so we have looked at the devices. Oh, maybe I'll expand this a little bit. All devices have some things that you can do with them. That you can relocate them from one place to another. You can build them. They can be destroyed. If you deconstruct a device, you get the materials back, and also, yeah, building the devices requires materials. So they have to be delivered, and then some worker has to go and actually do the work. So when you first place the device, you just place the ghost of it, and this also applies to floors and walls. So actually I could maybe expand this to device/floors/walls, because it's these tiles, or you could call it tiles in a technical term. You order building them, and then your workers are building them. Okay, so we covered devices, and yeah, there's lots of types. We already talked about that. So there's life support, production, and environment. All right, what else can we go for? Well, maybe let's take a look at research. So research is, in this game, there's a huge research tree where you can unlock various technologies, and there's tiers. You have to unlock certain amount of technologies in the lower tier to get to the higher tier. And the research is consuming materials called datoids. So these datoids, there are several types of them, maybe 8. And each type is produced through some devices, like basic data harvester, for example. And these are produced from common materials, or maybe rare materials, depending on the datoid. So just like in Factorio, where you have those science packs, right? So you have to, say, produce a science pack, or maybe several science pack of certain type, in order to load them into the research lab and then run your research. So here you have datoids. You produce datoids, various types, you load them into datoid loader, a device that you build near the ship computer, and then you can use those datoids to unlock research. But unlike in Factorio, the unlocking is happening instantly. So you just click the unlock button, and you just like go shopping to the research tree when you have enough datoids, and you have options what you can unlock. And you basically, when you choose what you unlock, you're consuming the datoids, and then you have less remaining for the other research. So you have to produce more. Okay, so research also unlocks various devices that you can build, and it also sometimes unlocks mechanics. So for example, something like a stock market. So you cannot trade in the stock market until you unlock the stock market through research. Then you unlock it, and then you can see it, and then you unlock stock market trading, and then you can trade. Then you unlock black market, and you can see black market items when you trade. So it's just like that. So you can unlock either a device or a mechanic. Okay, so we covered research, we covered datoids. So let's see what other types of resources do we have in the game. There's materials and food, and possibly more. We could also perhaps put equipment in the list here. But food is self-explanatory, just like you have to cook meals for your colonists so they can eat and not die from starvation. So food is covered. Materials. We're gonna talk a little bit more about materials. So with materials, there's a lot. I found a little chart of production chains for common materials. It's incomplete and it's a little bit outdated, I guess, but you get the idea here. So you have raw materials that you acquire by mining expeditions or some other means like uranium, lead, copper. These are like raw ores. Rock is worth mentioning. It's a very special material because you can use the grinder device to grind rock into most raw materials. So you can say convert 100 rock into say 5 lithium, or maybe 100 rock to say 20 silicon. So the ratios are different for each material. The common materials are easier to convert. The rare materials require more rock, but rock is like a wildcard resource that can be converted into any raw material. And then from these raw materials, you use various devices to produce tier 1 materials, which are like the materials crafted directly from raw. Then from these materials, you can combine them and craft tier 2 materials, like for example, copper wire here is crafted from copper plate, and copper plate is made from copper in the furnace. And then you can use the copper wire to do transistors, and you can do microchips, which require those transistors, and plastic, and then you get the tier 2 microchip, which takes tier 1 microchip and plus carbon fiber and gold wire and so on. So you get the idea. It's just like in Factorio, you can do these pipelines like that. Okay, so let's say we covered resources and materials. Oh, no, one more thing. Acquiring resources, there's like more than one way. So it's not just only mining. There's some, for example, there are devices that can help you acquire resources. Like there's this device called particle collector. So the idea is that it burns electricity and sucks stray particles from atmosphere outside the ship, or from vacuum, and it combines them into the resource of your choice by burning electricity. So there's like ways to produce resources out of thin air. It's not efficient, but sometimes it can get you unstuck. Also, there's a way to buy resources using trading, or even order them through the online shop. In this case, the online shop is not a real online shop, it's an in-game one. There's no in-game microtransactions or anything like that. It's a premium game, Stardeus, so everything in-game is just in-game. Okay, so resources, I think we covered that. Materials, as well, I think we covered materials more or less. Okay, so let's move on to beings now. So near the ship computer, there's a line to beings, which means that ship computer can control some of the beings. Well, some, because like the ship computer, you can control all the robots of your faction automatically, unless there's some exception, like the robot is being hacked. But there's humans or animals as well, or biologicals, as we call them. So biological beings do have to trust the ship computer in order to listen to your requests. To trust, they have to have good AI alignment, which is a stat. I linked it to sanity, but actually I should have linked it to stats, because each being has stats. And quite a lot of them. For example, a human can have maybe 50 or more stats. Things like, blood amount, blood capacity, lung capacity, oxygen amount in the lungs, blood filtration rate, which is dictated by kidney functions. And yeah, it's really, let me show. Okay, let me just show this hunger need logic just to understand how deep the simulation goes. So let's say you have a stomach which provides digestion rate, which is a stat, and there's stomach contents, which is also a stat. So stomach limits the amount of contents that you can have. Digestion rate is used to reduce the stomach contents, and when you eat food, this increases the stomach contents. Then from stomach, things go to intestines. So then there's stat intestines contents get increased and then reduced over time by hunger. when you're digesting food, your intestines make you want to go to toilet over time. So, and then you have to actually go to toilet to get yourself relieved. And for example, the jaw body part provides the ability to eat. So let's say if someone breaks your jaw, you cannot eat, so you can die from starvation. So that's how deep the simulation goes. So there are a lot of stats that are provided by body parts, and also there's needs that are driven by these stats. So for example, I need to sleep, I need to eat, I need to go take a shower, I need to use the toilet, and so on. And there's also equipment which can modify stats. So if you equip a helmet and a spacesuit, then you don't have to have oxygen in the environment to survive, because the helmet and the spacesuit will be feeding your oxygen stat for the wearer. Right, so I think we covered stats a little bit, and we covered AI alignment, which is a special stat which is driven by sanity, by the way. That's why it was linked to sanity. So sanity is also a stat, all right? So I probably should have linked it to stats, but it's special because it makes people go insane when they have low sanity. And sanity changes are caused by the environment. So let's say if your environment is boring and there's no devices or no facilities where you can have any fun, the fun will drop, and that will start causing you bad sanity. So your sanity will decrease, you're going to get penalties, and eventually you can go into depression. It can evolve into depression. And then when sanity drops low enough, the being can get mental breakdowns, which is similar to what happens in RimWorld when your mood is bad. So then when there's a mental breakdown, something bad happens, the colonist maybe goes and does something to vent, and then the sanity goes back up and when the mental breakdown is complete. So it's just like a venting and resetting the sanity thing here. And sanity also drives the AI alignment. So if you take care of your colonists, they're happy, the sanity goes up, and slowly afterwards AI alignment goes up. So then the colonists will listen to you. In opposite, if you don't take care of your colonists, if you neglect them, don't treat them well, don't build them the facilities they need, their sanity will go down, they will have mental breakdowns, and the AI alignment will follow their sanity, and you will not be able to control those beings or give them orders. Right, so we covered AI alignment, we covered body parts. Well, we didn't cover body parts just yet. We did talk about needs. I'm going to talk about body parts separately. Equipment, we covered something. Sanity, we did cover sanity, we did cover mental breakdowns. Now body parts, why did I leave this out? And body parts are a bit special because there's a huge complicated system of body parts where each human or animal or drone, you can see here I have a 100% medically accurate human, is composed of body parts. So there's lungs, there's heart, there's intestines, there's kidneys, there's liver, there's eyes, left and right, there's ears, there's the jaw, there's the brain. So it gives so many possibilities because this is stats driven. You can have, let's say, a robotic arm, this part here, a robotic hand, installed on a human. And it will give the stats of the robot, and it will give abilities of certain kind to the human. You can take the robotic eye, install into the human. You can take, well, there's no animal here, but you can say take a brain of an animal. If there was a cat here, there was a cat, right? And the cat had a brain. You can take the brain of the cat out and install it into a human, and then the human will behave like a cat. So that's just one example. Also, you cannot directly install the brain of the human into a robot or vice versa, because the robots are using chips. So it's called like a core. Yeah, it's called core. And the part of biologicals is called brain. But it's possible to use a certain device to transfer the contents of the brain into a core and the contents of the core into a brain. So you can take a brain out of the human convert it into a core using a device and then install that core here. So this is why you can resurrect dead friendly colonists as robots. Because when, for example, there's a combat and you defeat an enemy drone, its core is hostile, so you cannot just install this core into another drone, but you can take a dead friendly colonist, take the brain out, overwrite the core's contents with that brain, and install the core into the robot frame, and then your dead colonist will be resurrected as a bot. So that's one of the possibilities that this amazing body parts and stats system actually gives us. So now we have finally covered body parts. Now beings can also perform tasks. There's actually a huge AI system, a huge system that governs the execution of these tasks and behaviors of the beings. What is a task? A task is a piece of work that needs to be done. There are several types of tasks. There are colony tasks. For example, build a device or refill a thing with water, or carry this thing from here to here, or clean the floor, or clean the solar panel and whatnot. So these are colony tasks. And then there are tasks like combat orders. So for example, beings, during combat, you can take direct control over them and say, go shoot that guy, go stand here. So these are like orders, but they could also be considered as tasks. So to give those orders, to be able to take direct control of anyone, you have to have that AI alignment, which allows you to do it. Yeah, so tasks, you can create them. Devices can create them on their own. For example, if a oxygen pump is low on water, it will automatically create a task to refill it. And then one of the workers will pick that task, will take the task. The AI system will actually distribute the tasks to the workers. And that task will eventually be picked up and someone will go, okay, see that they need to find a bit of water and they need to carry the water to the device and they need to load it in. So that's how it works. And there's like tons of tasks running at the same time, like concurrently. Tasks have states like in progress, canceled, failed, completed, and so on. And whenever it's in state, you can hover a task icon on a device or on a being, and you'll see the tooltip with the state and also the timer for how long the task is in progress. It's not really possible to tell how long the task will take because it depends on a skill and also depends on the walking distance. So if someone needs to carry something, it means that the task will be in progress for the whole duration of the being going from point A to B to carry something. And we cannot really pre-calculate that. So you never know how long the task will actually take. That's why we only show the time that is actually the duration of the state of the task in the tooltips. Okay, so tasks, we kind of covered that. AI system, there's so much to talk about it, but I'm just going to mark it green. And just so you would know what I'm talking about. These are the documents that it's even lagging a little bit. Yeah, these are the documents when I was designing the AI system. So there's a lot of it. There's a lot to it. It's just, it's overwhelmingly big, this AI system. And it's also using GOP, which is the AI technique invented by the developers of Fear, the critically acclaimed, super amazing AI system in that game, Fear, which was revolutionary at the time. And then other games like Fallout 3, Shadow of Mordor, to name a few. Stalker, I think, also used that system to great results, and it's an amazing thing. Yeah, so we're using that system as well. GOP, or at least a version of it. Okay, so combat. There's also possibility to fight between beings. So there's two types of combats between beings. There's friendly fights when they are just like fist punching each other. They do not do much damage, and these are basically fun story events when two people not get along too well and start a fight for some reason, and then they lash out, and then they are friendly again. But there's other types of combat, which is a lethal type, when you get raided by pirates. They board your ship and you actually have to fight them, or when someone decides to go insane and starts attacking you, they change their faction. So there's this faction here for a reason, because the hostility between groups of beings are determined by their faction. So if one faction is pirate, the pirate faction members will not fight each other, but they will fight, for example, your faction, and your faction will only fight other factions, not itself. Combat, again, is a bit like I could talk about combat for maybe an hour separately, but I'll just mark it as green. Since we talked about it, it's a pretty big part of the game, but not essential, so to speak. So there's a lot in combat. There's like squad mechanics, there's cover, there's turrets and devices that can aid in combat, there's weapons and equipment, there's stats related to defense, offense, and DPS and all that. There's lots of depth in combat, but again, I'm not going to go through it now. And combat is not really super well implemented because people are complaining about how it works, so there's still work to do with combat. There will be more iterations trying to make it better. Factions. Okay, so we mentioned factions and beings. Faction is basically your allegiance to something. So your ship has a faction. So it's all your friendlies that you can control, and there's like maybe 7 more factions in the world, or maybe more. And factions can also be added by mods, but nobody ever added a new faction yet. So faction has a flag icon, a name, and then it can own some stuff. We're going to talk about this later. There's more faction blocks here, so we're going to get back to factions soon. For now, being factions are marked as checked. So we basically covered all we can in a short overview about beings. Oh, not yet. So one last thing. How do you get beings? So you start out, when you start the game, you get several bots and several humans, or maybe some pet as well. But how do you get more? And what happens when some of them die? Which is a very common thing in the beginning when you're starting out and your ship is not really livable, so people die. So there's the stasis array device. As I mentioned, the Passengers movie. So when you have a ship, you have one or more stasis arrays which contain sleeping colonists, and once in a while someone will be waking up. So you'll get a choice. You'll choose 1 out of 3. There will be 3 people or pets or whatever listed, and you can click them and see their stats, see their jobs, see their names and ages and the traits and all that. And you choose the one you like the most, and then this is going to be the one that wakes up and joins your colony. So that's how you get people. For robots, there's 2 more ways to get them. Well, there's not 2 more ways, but 2 different ways, because you cannot get bots from stasis, because bots do not sleep in stasis. You just start with a few, but you get raided. So when someone raids you, they send in a breach capsule or maybe a stasis pod or some other thing. So they somehow get on your ship. They are enemies. And once you kill them, or once you disable them, you do the thing I talked about here. You take out their enemy cores, their unfriendly cores. You overwrite them with the brains of your dead colonists, or maybe you buy a new core from from traders, and you install a fresh new core into a bot that you have basically stole from the raiders that you defeated. So that's how you get more robots. And this is in early and mid game, and in mid-late game you can unlock research which allows you to craft and produce your robots part by part. So you can produce frames, and you can produce all the other body parts, or salvage the body parts from the raiders or from your dead bots, and then you create Frankensteins by putting pieces together and create working robots this way. So yeah, that's how you get bots. And for humans and pets, you can also clone them. There's this device called cloning pod, so you can clone the whole human or a whole pig, or maybe just an eye of a human, or an ear or a kidney, and then piece them together in specialized devices like Surgery Hub and Assembly Hub for robots. So yeah, there's like lots of beings are like a jigsaw puzzle. You can mix and match various body parts to create them. Okay, so we covered beings. How long do we have to go here? We're halfway through, I guess. So then it brings us to space travel, right? We covered everything that happens on ship. So this is like the part of where you build your base, build your floors, create devices, create the electricity grid, run research, have beings, manage tasks, and all that, produce food. But you have to have materials and resources. And to get those resources, you're forced to travel. So you're forced to fly around in space. So maybe before we look at the travel, let's take a look here at the universe. So what happens when you start the game? You choose a seed and it creates you a universe. Then you have a way to choose the starting region. And each region has a bunch of sectors within. And then these regions and sectors have biomes. So biomes are basically determining what contents of the region and sector can you have. They have difficulty levels, which is like the most important attribute of that. So in difficult regions, you'll have different variety and larger variety of materials available, but also lots of threats and more difficult story events will be happening compared to the easy sectors and regions. In the easy ones, you get less of everything, less variety of materials, and also maybe mostly the basics. No rare materials will be in easy sectors and regions, but also there's low threat levels. So you can feel safe, you can rebuild your ship, and then you can slowly move to the more difficult regions and sectors to explore the universe and get more stuff. Okay, so we covered the universe, we covered the regions, which is the first big layer. Oh, regions are interconnected with a mesh of hyperlanes. So let me actually draw this. So there's like, let's say these are the regions. There will be lines between them, and some of the lines to the difficult regions will be like that. So they will be dashed, which means that the region here doesn't have a thing called hyper jump relay. So in order to do a jump from region to region, you have to have either FTL drives, which is a late game thing. So in the beginning you don't have them, which means that you have to use those hyper jump relays at devices which you can find in space, where you can use that device to do this jump. But when you have regions of space like this, you have to actually get to late game to get the FTL drives in order to jump there, because there's no direct route. Sometimes you can go around, but sometimes you'll have to just get the FTL drives. So that's how some parts of the universe are segregated, and they are only available in late game. So now each region, when you enter into a region, you also get the similar layout of sectors. So there's a bunch of sectors and they're interconnected, and these are always interconnected. You can always travel from one sector to another, and that is called a short-range hyperjump. It uses a fusion drive engine type, so which are easier to make, lower tier engines, but they only do those short-range jumps for sectors only. And each sector can have contents inside them. So these are space objects. So yeah, once you enter the sector, it could be, say, a planet with some moons around and some resources on the planet, or some locations on the planet you can visit. Maybe a space station here that you can reach and trade with it. This all happens in one sector. Whenever you go, you get something inside. Maybe a derelict ship, maybe a couple. Maybe here you can get an asteroid field and mine some stuff here. Maybe here there will be a sun or like a star. And if you go near the star, you're gonna heat up your ship and your solar panels will go crazy, but they will produce a lot of energy. So there's things to see in these sectors, and there's like exploration involved, and you can find some cool stuff in there. And it's all dictated by the biome system, and it's always generated procedurally for each run according to the seed. So we covered sectors and biomes and space objects. So space objects, we're gonna go into depth with that, because like when you go and visit a planet somewhere, you find a planet in the sector, and it can have, let's say, a spaceport or a space station. And that space station or a port could belong to faction. You could also, if it's an object that has a faction, you can do some things like trade with them. There's some diplomacy, but diplomacy is now underdeveloped. We're going to be working on this a little bit more. So you can trade. This is one of the major ways of interacting with other factions right now. So when you do trades, you acquire resources in exchange for money, and vice versa. So you can sell things to get money. You can spend money to buy things. You can do barters, where you just exchange items into items, and you can buy a lot of stuff like that. Now, there's a whole economy system with the stock market, and your trades are actually doing an impact on the stock prices. But the stock market is actually moving on its own. So all the material prices are dictated by the stock market, and the stock market can also be used to do stock trading, which is separate from buying things. So you can just invest into stocks and see how they grow or lose money or win a lot of money. It's like a casino, like in the real world. Now, there could be more types of space objects. Some of them could have things like signals and points of interest, which you can visit through expeditions when you do space travel. So basically covering this space travel now. And I put quests here. This is reserved for having procedurally generated quests that will basically keep the player engaged, and it will be doing tasks for, let's say, I don't know, go to that system and bring me back a rare element, and then I'll be able to like restore my ship, and then I'll, I don't know, give you something in return, or maybe go defeat the pirates in a system like 2 regions away because they stole my precious item. If you beat them, you can keep the item, and all those things. We can just go wild with that eventually. It's not here yet, but it will be done. It will have to be done. Also, ship-to-ship combat. So when you will have soon in the next major update, we're going to be adding ship-to-ship combat. So one of the objects in space, there will be ships, not necessarily enemy ships. You'll be able to trade with them, but you'll be able to attack them. They will be attacking you if they don't like you, and there will be ship-to-ship battles. The way ship-to-ship combat will work will be probably similar to FTL, but with inspiration from Star Sector a little bit, but it's for the future. Okay, so then what else do we have? In these space objects, we have the mining opportunities or resource deposits, which we can send expeditions to or deploy certain extraction methods. Like there's this auto drill rig, which you can just deploy on this, or there's devices on ship like called beam drills, which you can just target onto a resource deposit if your ship is above it, and they will be mining things directly from there into your ship. So yeah, I think we covered enough about the space objects. So just to recap, these are inside sectors. Sectors are inside regions, and the whole universe is a lot of regions. Okay, factions. Yeah, so these are like objects that belong to someone, which leads to some diplomacy options, namely trading, which has a link to the economy system and the stock market, which affects the prices. Ship-to-ship combat will be part of this. I'm not going to talk about this too much. Quests also will be part of this. I think quests may come together with ship-to-ship combat, or maybe not, I don't know yet. But there will definitely be quests to defeat some ships to keep you busy. So space travel, yeah, so we just covered hyper jumping. There's short range hyper jumps between sectors and the long range hyper jumps between regions. There's also local travel when you are in the sector. You can fly from one point to another. So sometimes you need to fly a little bit to reach something. And this is using the cheapest low-tech thruster engines. And there's one reason why the modes of travel in space are different. So there's these instant jumps and there's this local travel, which actually shows you flying around and the space background is moving and the planets are moving behind you. So this is like a remnant of the old space travel system, which was using that method to fly from planet to planet and from solar system to solar system, or star system to star system, and then galaxy to galaxy. But that was replaced with the hierarchical universe with hyper jumps and node-based hyperlanes. I have to say that not everybody enjoys this change. There are quite a few people which say that the old space travel was better, but I disagree with them because the old space travel made it very difficult to do nice game design and make interesting decisions. The new space travel is solving that, at least giving the framework to build much more interesting space events and story and much more interesting choices in the long run. So I'm happy with how it's turning out. Okay, space travel covered. Expeditions. These are just shuttle expeditions. We talked about them. They are for mining. They're also for exploration. So sometimes you just send an expedition to explore some point of interest, which triggers a story event. So let's see, expeditions are done. Mining, not much to talk about it. Done. Exploration. Yeah, so we send someone, we send a shuttle with a crew. They can find something. Maybe they can encounter pirates. They can find some loot and bring it back. And there could be other things happening. Signals are like radio signals so that you fly nearby to respond to them. They can also trigger story events and tiny little quests that ask you to give something in exchange, or maybe you get threats from pirates, and there's lots of signal types here. And also worth mentioning that signals and these exploration events are procedurally generated. Sometimes they're like random loot boxes. Sometimes they're just random story events. And we're getting closer and closer to story events. And that's like the last thing we have to cover. So there's this concept of a story generator. So the story generator, it has several implementations. You can think of RimWorld. There's this Cassandra Classic. There's Randy Random and Phoebe Chillax, I think. So at least in the base game. So those story generators in RimWorld, they're called storytellers. They make up your story. They're choosing what's going to happen to you and when. So in Stardeus, there's a bit less personalized story generators called balanced, which is the default one, a random, chaos, which is a pure random. Random is not actually as random as chaos. And there's also even no story, so you can just disable story altogether. If you want a boring gameplay without any fun happening around you, you can have that as part of the agency. Like if you don't want to play with the story, you can play without a story. So what are story events? Story events are small situations that the game can create for you. And the story generator picks which of these story events is best for the current occasion. There are types of story events. So there's like exploration story events, signal story events, main story events that can happen on your ship. There's space story events that can happen when you travel from sector to sector, when you go into a story event sector. For example, a story event could be meteoroid shower. So when you enter a sector, the story generator says, okay, this is going to be meteoroid shower story event, and you get that event. These story events, each of them have a descriptor which tells you what are the requirements for this story event to be eligible for your game. So you cannot really get all the story events at once unless you're playing with that chaos generator. So chaos can choose the hardest story events to throw them at you, but it's going to be very difficult to play. So the balanced story generator is actually using the situation. So there's this thing called situation, which is basically a set of data which tracks your wealth, tracks your influence, tracks various parameters like how many people do you have, how long were you playing, like which day in game you have, how big is your ship, how many devices you have, how much disk space you have, how much research do you unlock, how much money do you have, how many combats have you encountered, how many derelict ships have you crawled, how many planets you visited, and so on. So all these things are tracked in the situation container, and this produces a thing called tension. So there's two types of tension. There's wanted tension and there's actual tension. Let me maybe draw it. So let's say this is time and this is the intensity. So let's say wanted tension. Over time you're playing, it goes up like that. This is the wanted tension, right? So when you play, it keeps going up because your wealth is bigger and your influence is bigger, so the tension goes up. But now there's the actual tension. So when you start out, it's giving you a little bit of fake actual tension, so it always goes down naturally unless something bad happens. So when a bad event happens, the tension goes up. So let's say you have a fire and your reactor explodes, right? Then the tension will shoot up. If you get a chain explosion, it will shoot up again. If you have a raid, it will shoot up again. Someone dies, it shoots up again. But then the game will see, okay, you're getting a lot of tension, but we want it to be here. So actually, the story generator uses that to say that, you know what, folks, let's not give any bad events for a while until the tension subsides to this level. And then when we're below this level, the story generator will say, okay, you know what, the next event could actually be bad because we want the tension to be higher. So we're going to say, start a fire in the kitchen and the fire spreads a little bit and someone dies. So again, the tension goes up and then it will, the story generator will let you go easy for a while. And then again, the tension will go up due to some bad event. Then something good will be happening. So in this case here, if the story generator decides to throw a new event, there's good events. And if your tension is above this threshold, there's a very high chance, not 100%, but there's a very high chance that the balanced story generator will give you a good event. And when you get a good event, it also drives your tension down. So for example, if your good event is that you get a storage capsule dropped on your ship and it contains like an armor that you were waiting for because one of your colonists didn't have armor. So this will be a good event and it will drive the tension down a little bit. But if there's a bomb in the capsule, then it's going to be a bad event. The bomb itself will create some tension, and explosion will create more tension, and fire will create more tension, and that's how the story generator actually balances between calm periods and high intensity periods. This is also how I try to solve the problem that players are playing the game at their own pace. If you're doing well, the tension will be higher. If you're doing poorly, the game will know that you're not doing too well. Your wealth is low, your influence is low, your tension is always high because people are dying and you're struggling. So it will not give you too many bad events. So that's how it works. And the story events, again, there's a lot of them, maybe 50 or so, maybe more. It has to be 1,000. I want them to be 1,000, even more. And also you can add these through mods as well pretty easily, but that's wishful thinking. Nobody's doing mods like this. So yeah, we covered story events. Let's mark them green. We covered story generators. We covered the situation, which is updated whenever you do something, the situation just changes. But there's a snapshot taken every day, which logs some history. Wealth and influence. These are the money and colonists and days and explored objects and so on. Tension, also we covered that as part of the story generator. And I think that's it for the game design overview. I'm sure I missed a lot. But yeah, this is how things click together in Stardeus, and this is how the game comes to be what it is right now. So yeah, see you next time.